Without an exaggeration, by what we've seen in Bucha and vicinity, we can conclude that Russia is worse than ISIS in the scale and the ruthlessness of the crimes committed. We will be collecting all the evidence. We will be working with all international institutions relevant to identify and bring those responsible for these crimes to account.
International outrage and disgust. The Kremlin is now accused of massacring civilians as Russian forces retreated from the suburbs of Ukraine's capital. Images of bodies in shallow graves and strewn throughout the city. Evidence of torture and killings at close range. War crimes. Moscow claims it was all staged. Ukraine's president calls it genocide. This morning, reaction from around the globe. As we debut our 9 a.m. hour, we'll talk to Ukraine's chief prosecutor, who says her team has identified hundreds of suspects and is pursuing thousands of war crime cases against Russia. What this all means for Vladimir Putin and what his retreat from Kyiv says about the future of the war. Plus, the latest headlines from Washington. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee joins us ahead of a big day for President Biden's Supreme Court nominee. President Obama is set to return to the White House this week, and Donald Trump gets behind a political has-been, hoping to make a return to politics. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Monday, April 4th. Great to have you all with us.
It's great to have
you.
Willie, so New York Post headline. This is obviously, this is what the world was talking about yesterday. When you think that it can't get worse, the mass crimes by Vladimir Putin, and now the Russian troops, we see, obviously, it can.
Yeah, the front pages of almost every international newspaper show dead bodies, shallow graves, mass graves, horrific images coming out of what Russian forces left behind after pulling back from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. We should warn you this morning, the images really are disturbing and quite graphic. Pictures and videos from the town of Bucha, northwest of Kyiv, show widespread devastation with dozens of bodies lying scattered around the city. Some of the victims had their hands tied behind their backs. Others reportedly had close-range gunshot wounds and signs of torture. Residents say Russians would go from building to building, take people from the basements where they were hiding, check their phones for evidence of anti-Russian activity before taking them away or just shooting them on the spot. Here's a listen to what some of the people there had to say.
Those people were just walking and they shot them without any reason. Bang. In the next neighborhood, Stekolka, it was even worse. They would shoot without asking any questions.
He went to get some wood when all of a sudden the Russians started shooting. They hit him a bit above the hill, crushing the bone, and he fell down. The shooter shouted, "Don't scream or I will shoot," and they turned away. Then they shot off his left leg completely. Then they shot him all over the chest.
Gosh, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling the situation in Bucha genocide, describing it as scenes from a horror movie. According to the city's mayor, about 270 local residents were buried in 2 mass graves. At least 40 dead bodies were left in the streets. Ukrainian officials say more than 400 bodies have been found in Kyiv and surrounding areas. And guys, international independent reporters just now getting into the city of Bucha, including NBC News, to take a look at what's there. They say they have no way of knowing yet even how many people were killed there. But it does go back to a couple weeks ago. Remember, the people said, well, I don't know if we want to use the term war crimes. President Biden called him a butcher.
Right.
What more do you need to see?
He's a butcher.
Really?
And, you know, this is, Willie, we can say this. We can talk about Vladimir Putin, but this is what Russia does.
Yeah.
This is what Russian soldiers do. This is what they're doing in Ukraine. This is what they did in Aleppo. This is what they did in Grozny. This is what they did in Poland. In World War II. This is what they do, and it's ghastly. And before we go any further here, we're going to be getting to Clint Watts at the big board in a second about where this is going. Historically, this is going to be remembered, and there are going to be people held accountable. Historically, the huge story that overlays this is the humiliating and historic retreat of Russian troops from the capital, which was, of course, Putin's top priority. It's incredible how Ukraine has routed them. And as they move back, you can only say, thank God they were as effective as they were, because how much worse could this story have been? But that is, if you just look at the battlefield, it's nothing short of shocking what the Ukrainian troops have done. Jonathan Lemire, this is obviously pushing Vladimir Putin closer to a settlement. We're still a long way away from there. If you read, though, get some readouts from what happened Saturday, you actually had Ukrainians talking about the possibility of peace, but then Sunday, we wake up, horrific news. You wrote about how much more difficult this was going to make it for the world community to come to terms not only with peace, but as Biden said, with Vladimir Putin being a butcher, being a war criminal. How exactly do you get this guy back into the G7, G8?
Yeah, there had been some talk of even some momentum towards a Zelensky-Putin summit. There had been enough progress made. Both sides say they weren't there yet, Russia, Ukraine. They thought that was in the offing. That now probably has changed, and it would be that much more difficult. White House officials I've talked to wonder how could Zelensky agree to any sort of negotiated end to this war, even though it would end the fighting, if it meant giving up an inch of territory to Vladimir Putin in the wake of these war crimes being found. Considering the amount of Ukrainian blood being shed, how can you make that deal? And this is what the West is grappling with now as well. White House officials believe that this war has reached sort of an inflection point there, where certainly it does look like Russian forces are moving away from Kyiv, leaving these war crimes in their wake, and focusing on the Donbass region, where there's still going to be seemingly months potentially, and maybe even a year of violence. That's their fear.
I'm just going to say, Willie, it is extraordinary. You know, we have been knocking, of course, the U.S. government and the war and intel community for years. I, of course, a champion of the intel community. I know they make mistakes because it's a very complex world out there. It's remarkable in this case what our intel community has done. And I say that only because a week ago, I was talking to somebody at the White House, high up at the White House, who said, yeah, Putin knows. He finally knows he screwed up. And this retreat, they're going to retreat. Like, they're going to retreat now from Kyiv and start going north and focus on the Donbass. And here we go, 5 days later, it's actually cemented. That's what they're doing. It's really, though, remarkable. Our intel community has been right time and time again. You know, the French don't like to say the U.S. is right, but even the French are saying we were wrong. The U.S. intel community has been right every step of the way. Here's just another example of that.
And there's
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.